Hey everyone, welcome in. Excited to have you all here. We have a pretty awesome conversation ahead of us today. We're going to be talking about AI, we're going to be talking about crypto, and we're going to be talking about Bittensor, a crypto project that sits at the nexus between these two rising verticals, these hot verticals. We're going to be talking with Barry Silbert, a man who within crypto really needs no introduction. He's the founder and CEO of DCG and the founder and CEO of Yuma. And your very own Tom Lee, who also needs not an introduction, the head of research at Fundstrat Global Advisors. So with that, would love to welcome both Barry and Tom in. I'll be the MC today, trying to keep these two on track and so we can get to all of the desired topics. But I'm sure it's going to be a great conversation. Tom, Barry, how are we doing?
Excellent. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'd love to say a few words about Barry and my relationship with Barry before we sort of dive in. I think it is really a unique opportunity for Fundstrat to be speaking with Barry. Barry makes very few public appearances. I believe this may be maybe his third in the last 2 years. And I always learn a lot spending time with Barry. When Fundstrat first started working on Bitcoin 8 years ago, Barry was one of the first people that reached out to Fundstrat and to introduce us to the community. And over those years, I found Barry to be one of the people that really does have a lens that looks forward. Barry was the first creator of a secondary market for private companies, way before it's now liquid and created, but he essentially saw and started that market. He was one of the first to really conceptualize the idea of not only tokenizing, real world assets, but even a digital world where digital goods may actually be important. So he was really, really in front of the whole idea of NFTs. And, he's been really ardent in the support of limited supply, so a sound money supply in any token economy. And I do think that's really proven itself out, that provides a lot of fidelity and confidence to anyone looking at any potential token economy and system. But now Barry is looking far ahead into AI and really solving potentially some of the biggest problems around AI with a decentralized approach of decentralized AI with Bittensor. And I do think it's a very complicated topic. So I think Sean's going to help us walk through really sort of the skeleton of Bittensor to help set up this conversation. And from there, we can then provide some context around how Bittensor solves some of these future problems. And of course, with that as an introduction, Barry, I just thought if you had any sort of introductory comments, I'd open it to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Tom, thank you for the kind words. You were so early in the crypto and the Bitcoin space, and your approach to education and awareness and kind of translating what at the time was, I mean, this was probably 2017, 2018 when you started kind of writing about it before anybody else on Wall Street was writing about it. I think Bitcoin is partially here today because of the work that you and your colleagues did. So I'm excited to go down the rabbit hole of Bittensor with you.
Yeah. Oh, and that's right. And I forgot to even mention, of course, the most important thing Barry was far ahead on is that he realized the first important use case for crypto was to allow people to actually easily acquire Bitcoin. And so Grayscale was the original financial plumbing between traditional financial markets and then acquiring a secure way to own Bitcoin. And as you know, that is literally Wall Street's biggest product today. So again, Barry was a decade ahead of Wall Street. So I do think that's why his interest in Bittensor, we all need to pay attention to because Barry does look ahead.
Yeah, can we actually unpack that a little more, Barry? Like I said, in crypto circles, you don't need an introduction, but there probably are some new Fundstrat people joining. Would love to just get some more color around your origin story in crypto and how you got so highly convicted on Bitcoin as an investment so early on.
Yeah, well, yeah. I started my career sort of on Wall Street. I was an investment banker, and I heard about Bitcoin in 2011. And I think at the time, I think if anybody had heard about it, it was probably in the context of the Silk Road kind of website. And that's not why I heard about Bitcoin, but that's why I was excited about Bitcoin. But that's how I heard about it. And I was definitely in 2011. I was definitely of the belief, incorrectly, that we were not through the credit crisis. And so I was looking for investments that would perform well in periods of kind of money printing and high inflation and dislocation. And so I heard about it. Like most people at the time, I was skeptical, dismissive, and I spent about kind of 6, 9 months kind of being a skeptic. But in 2012, I said, like, I think this has the opportunity, the potential to, at the very least, displace gold, but maybe even something bigger than that. And so I started buying Bitcoin around $7, $8. And I put enough into it so that if I was right, it would have a transformative impact on my, my financial situation. And over the kind of next couple of years, I just got more and more excited about the potential for it. So I started building DCG, which is a company that we invest and build and buy companies within the crypto space. And so, as Tom mentioned, we own Grayscale, which is the largest native crypto asset manager. We own Foundry, which runs the largest Bitcoin mining pool in the world. We own Fortitude, which is a major player in the mining space. We own Luno, which is kind of the Coinbase for emerging markets, especially Africa. And then, as Sean mentioned, we just started a company called Yuma, which I'm also now the CEO of, which is focused exclusively on doing for Bittensor what DCG did for Bitcoin.
That's great. So Barry, Tom, you guys go way back. Any fun origin stories from the early Bitcoin days? How'd you guys meet?
Well, so I was racking my brain trying to figure out how we met, Tom. And I remember you always being in my Bitcoin life, and so I don't remember kind of a pre-Bitcoin life without Tom in it. Do you remember where we met? How we met?
Yes. I wrote this research report in 2017, and it's like trying to essentially explain why we thought Bitcoin could reach 22,000 by the year 2022. So
What
it
was
was
the
like
price? What was the price at the time?
it was under 1,000 or around 1,000. And our thesis was that we had built several models. One was, and these are logical, a network effect model. So usage per number of wallets and usage per wallet explain 90% of the Bitcoin's price rise. So we figured even if you didn't really understand Bitcoin, you can explain its price move. And then we made a comparison to gold and just said that at a some ratio gold, Bitcoin's price value could rise. And after that report came out, both you and Michael Sonnenschein reached out and said, you'd love to meet because, we're like one of the first people that's trying to write about Bitcoin in a way that's public and available to the general public. And then you brought me to one of your offsites, and that's where we met. And then the rest is history.
That's right. Well, I remember now. You were actually kind of the inspiration for Grayscale. We ran a drop gold advertising campaign. We did a bunch of TV commercials. Actually, pretty funny. People should kind of look them up online. Bit controversial, but I think quite effective. And obviously over the past kind of 10 years, I think kind of the digital gold kind of analogy is kind of stuck as kind of Bitcoin's primary use case.
Yeah, and by the way, I think DCG might have been in the hundreds of millions. Grayscale had hundreds of millions of AUM, of course, and then in a couple of short years it went to 10 and then 40 billion.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, quite a run.
Barry, did you get a lot of death threats from gold bugs? I know they can be pretty territorial.
Well, at the time they were not really on Twitter. So I got they were probably kind of trying to write letters to me. Actually, the best reaction we got was actually the World Gold Council had to actually do kind of a counter campaign against our digital gold drop gold campaign.
Amazing. So that's actually a great segue. Tom just worked through some of the digital gold thesis. I'm sure you're kind of on the same page regarding that and how it translates to the Bitcoin thesis. Translates to Bitcoin. I would love to maybe transition to how your broader thesis on crypto has evolved to bring you to the point where you've spun up Yuma and are interested in this new, we'll call it an era in crypto.
Well, yeah, I think the past, I mean, I guess I've been in the space now with 13, approaching 14 years, and I've seen it all. And I think it's fair to say that you could probably break kind of the crypto asset class down into, I look at it kind of three categories. You have Bitcoin, which kind of is separate and apart from everything else. Then you have a very, very small number of projects that I think have utility, have a reason to exist, have kind of investment characteristics that kind of you'd probably consider putting money into. And then again, I'm talking that's probably like, I don't know, 10 to 20. And then you have the rest, and the rest is really just kind of crap. And I think most of it's going to go to zero. I mean, it's good for gambling and speculating on, but from like a true kind of like, all right, actually kind of providing real utility, Bitcoin, a handful of projects, and then there's everything else. And so as there's been a growing number of attempts to kind of figure out how to leverage crypto for purposes of AI, we as an investor, we got involved with, we probably invested in maybe 10 or so kind of, let's call it decentralized AI type projects. And we invested in Bittensor in 2021. And over that time, it's the one that has really just kind of exploded and reached a kind of escape velocity. And as kind of having been in Bitcoin from the early days, every day I look at what's happening with Bittensor, and I draw all these parallels to the things I was seeing with Bitcoin back in 2012. I'm now seeing with Bittensor today.
Yeah, so maybe we just hop into Bittensor. I did want to talk a bit about AI, maybe a bit about the AI stack, the macro thesis, but let's just assume we appreciate that AI is massive and it's going to continue to be massive. Could you maybe just start out by telling us what Bittensor is?
I was hoping you were going to explain Bittensor. So Bittensor is really hard to understand, and so let's start with that. And if you ask 5 people, what is Bittensor, you're going to get 10 different answers from those 5 people. But, and Tom will remember this, it's just like Bitcoin. In the early days of Bitcoin, you ask somebody what's Bitcoin, they would say it's digital money. They would say it's digital gold. They would say it's a money transfer system. They would say it's a ledger. It was and it is all these different things. So what Bittensor is a decentralized network on which AI applications are being built that are permissionless, that are decentralized, and that create an ingenious incentive-based system for anybody to essentially kind of build these applications, build these they're called subnets on top of Bittensor. And there's an underlying token called Tau that creates or provides the incentive mechanism to organize all these different participants within the network. So it's a very, very high level, but go deeper.
That's helpful, Barry. And Sean, can you pull up slide 18?
Absolutely.
Because I think this is explaining.
Can you see
while you're pulling it up, I got to say the report that Fundstrat put out about Bittensor, which I presume this is from, is by far the best report about Bittensor that's been published. So everybody should get a copy of that.
Yeah,
appreciate those sentiments, Barry, and definitely want to give Tom Couture his flowers here. He did a lot of the blocking and tackling on this, and yeah, we'll send this out for those that didn't receive it. We'll send it out with follow-up email.
Okay, so I think that this is like this schematic Barry was talking about, because I do think this will help those who are tuning in to get a little context. What Barry is saying is that instead of a centralized AI, like one company based in one, geographic location, They want to create a decentralized AI where functions of that AI, whether it's compute or the language models, operate and with specific subnets and an existing incentive mechanism to really essentially identify the best in class solution through rewards mechanisms. So, I mean, Barry, if I'm like kind of mangling this explanation, but that's really, I think what it is it's exactly how blockchain works, where you're essentially decentralizing that entire stack through what's called subnets.
Right. And so, Tom, that's exactly right. Let me unpack it a little more. So think about a subnet as a competition. So anybody can launch a subnet. There's a cost to register a subnet, but anybody can launch a subnet. And they identify what is the competition they want to run, what are the rules, what are the incentives, and how do you decide who the winner is? And so there's now 128 subnets. And I think the future of Bittensor is hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of subnets. And the owner of the subnet kind of they set the rules, and essentially the world competes to win that competition. And so there's subnets that are focused on drug discovery, on predicting sports outcomes. There's compute subnets. There's inference subnets, and it's really exciting to kind of see all the different applications that are being launched. I think this map kind of gives a good overview. But what makes it even more interesting is the Bittensor kind of project went through a pretty major upgrade in February, where now each one of these subnets have their own token. And so they've created what's been created is essentially kind of a market-based system, so that investors can essentially kind of invest in these applications, the AI applications, come really from from the get-go. And people who own these subnets, they receive some of these tokens for launching these subnets and running these competitions. But it's all tied to Tau, the token. So all these subnets, when you're buying or selling the subnet tokens, you're essentially indirectly kind of participating in the overall kind of Bittensor kind of Tau network, which makes it the most unique crypto project out there, different from an Ethereum or a Solana, where when you invest in a token that is launched on top of Solana, there is no real economic tie between the token itself and Solana. Whereas with Bittensor, all the trading goes in and out of Tau in these subnet tokens.
So to put a finer point on it, the trading pair for all of these subnet tokens is not USD, it's Tau.
Correct.
Yeah, and if you, Sean, maybe slide 24 just sort of gives you the overview of Tau, the token itself.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just to comment on what Barry said, I think another way to think about this conceptually is, for the past couple decades, open source software has proven to be superior in most ways. But the challenge with open source software is finding a monetization model. And that's especially tough with AI. And this here, Tau implements tokenized incentives to enable, like Barry said, competition within this, open source software realm to actually find and surface the best models. Is that a good take, Barry?
Yeah, no, it is. And I think people who are kind of crypto native are like, oh, that's using crypto incentives, that's kind of like nothing new. Where I think Bittensor separates itself further is it was modeled after Bitcoin. So the Tau token itself, it is just like Bitcoin. It is capped at 21 million. There's halvings. There was no VC round. There's no like foundation allocation. There's no, even the founders of Bittensor didn't get Tau when it was launched, just like Bitcoin. And all of the subnet tokens as well. When a company, an individual launches a subnet, there is no kind of early allocation to kind of insiders. So you have this community that's formed that is so organic, that is everybody who is involved with Bittensor, whether you're investing, or you're involved at the kind of the top level Bittensor Tau level, or you're down to the subnet level, you are using your time, you're using your energy, you're using your expertise, you're using your data, you're contributing in exchange for getting access to either the subnet tokens or the Tau token itself. Which again, it makes it's so similar to Bitcoin, unlike any other project that I've seen.
So you mentioned a halving. What is the next halving?
The timing, I believe it's maybe January of 26. It'll be the first halving actually, in 26. Like we're kind of circa, if you kind of think about, kind of overlaying this on Bitcoin, the first halving would have been around for Bitcoin, maybe it was at 2012, 2013. So, we're kind of similar to that time frame. And interesting, I mean, the price of Tau, I think is around, $350. It's actually somewhat similar to kind of where Bitcoin was at the same time.
Yeah, and I think slide 29 kind of shows you the exponential growth in the number of Bittensor accounts here.
Yeah, and I think what's happening now is you're seeing exchanges add Tau. So you have Coinbase added not that long ago. Grayscale launched the Bittensor Tau Trust, which is open to accredited investors right now to get access to Tau. You have large custodians like BitGo just added a Tau to their tokens. So we're kind of at the kind of early stages of the access points, and the rail is kind of being built for investors to be able to access the token. And interestingly, the subnet tokens are not really accessible really anywhere right now, other than kind of going direct through some sites. And so maybe we'll talk more about Yuma's approach to how we're going to handle that.
Yeah, so I know you already mentioned, you listed a bunch of subnets and what they're working on. Any that stick out as favorites to you that have shown some pretty substantial traction?
Yeah, well, so Yuma, part of our model is we run an accelerator. We're building, for lack of a better description, kind of the Y Combinator for subnets. And so we have, I think, 13 of the 128 have kind of gone through our accelerator. So I don't want to pick a favorite child, so I'm not going to. But I think the beauty of Bittensor is the market is voting right now as to which are the subnets that are delivering the most value, have the most utility, have the best upside. And so, you can go to TauStats or Tau.com or Tau.app, and you kind of see, okay, real time, the market is saying, okay, this one that's doing compute, this one's that's doing deep fake detection, this one that does Bitcoin mining. The market is assessing, kind of what the value is of these subnets right now.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting ones that Thomas Couture highlighted. So can you jump to 42, Sean? Because this one is basically algorithmic prop trading. And here you can, Sean can actually describe it because I can't really see it on the screen well, but this is basically showing you and ranking the profitability of different algorithms.
Yeah, so this is essentially, it provides an algorithm that provides trading signals. It's called Taoshi's Request Network, and yeah, it looks like this is a tool that has been back tested against price data for X number of years and has proven to perform pretty well. And I think there are users that are benefiting from the signals on this proprietary trading network. Yeah.
I think it's helpful for me to let's take a step back and I think it's important to understand why or how Bittensor and its approach to decentralization is, I think, an enabler of innovation. And so if you look at the internet and the way the internet came about, Tom, probably remembers in the 90s, the way that you would access the internet was via a Prodigy, an America Online, a CompuServe. And it was super cool. You got to see, stock quotes, or you got to see what the weather was, or, maybe there was like classified ads, but, kind of your view of what the World Wide Web was ultimately kind of what those companies told you it to be. And then in the mid 90s, Mosaic launched the first browser, and all of a sudden people realize, oh wow, okay, like anybody can kind of build an access point to this thing called the World Wide Web. And then you saw this explosion of websites. You saw the Amazons and the eBays kind of get launched. And so we're kind of where we are right now with AI is you have the open AIs and you have the Claudes and you have the kind of the large companies that are kind of delivering these kind of access points to AI. And I think that Bittensor is kind of the equivalent of kind of that Netscape moment, that Mosaic moment, where all of a sudden anybody can launch one of these subnets, one is essentially kind of like a website. And what also makes it even more interesting is because each of these subnets have a token, it also enables investors in the market to participate in the potential growth of these applications, of these websites. It's like being able to have invested in Amazon when the website went live. And that for me is exciting because I think there's a really interesting opportunity here to really transform the capital formation process for ideas, especially AI related ideas.
Right, and that's one of crypto's major advantages, right? The seamless capital formation. Tom, you brought up an interesting point in our conversation this morning regarding the trend we're seeing in among these operators of foundational models and the acqui-hires they're making. Could you maybe speak to the parallel between that and perhaps what Bittensor offers?
Yeah, well, and I'd love Barry's perspective, but it's interesting to me. We hosted a podcast earlier this week with Alex Kantrowitz, who's essentially a technology researcher. And we started that conversation off by what he has noticed is two things happening. First is that a lot of the founders of these Mag 7s are coming back into the business because AI has become so important to like Google or Alphabet that he needs to be there, and actually recruit and architect the future. And it's eye-popping that Meta is offering $100 million bonuses to OpenAI employees. And to me, that means if you're investing that much in a singular person, that these centralized models are, of course, going to be even more moated and centralized because of the huge investment in just people, So I think that this is, a question that I'd love to throw out to Barry, which is like, to me, how does decentralized AI actually solve some of these issues? Because, if we're going to be offering developers $100 million, is there a better model to actually, as you're pointing out, incentivize innovation and create these contests through the subnets?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I sure hope there's a better model. There has to be a better model than that. And the way that Bittensor is attacking it is essentially when a subnet gets launched, the competitors, anybody can launch a subnet and anybody can compete. So if you have unique access to a data set or a model or access to compute, whatever the subnet is doing, you can compete and you earn rewards, you earn that token. And so that's called mining. And so don't get it confused with Bitcoin mining. But where it is similar in that today, at the current Bitcoin prices, there's about $10 billion a year of Bitcoin that is given to the Bitcoin miners for running the infrastructure to secure the network. It's obviously an important task. Is 10 billion what it should cost to secure a multi-trillion-dollar network? Probably. But Bittensor says, okay, what if we were to take that issuance, that incentive, and instead of using it to incent Bitcoin miners to buy equipment and facilities and to kind of run these machines, to essentially kind of guess a random number, why don't we instead use that to incent people to engage or contribute to the Bittensor network. So right now, at the current Bittensor price, there's about $1 billion right now per year of value that is up for grabs for anybody who wants to get involved with and contribute to the Bittensor network. And so if you are a graduate student who has some time on the weekend, or you're a startup who has not yet launched a product, or you're an enterprise who has an idea for a subnet to launch, you can kind of launch one of these things and actually earn revenue in the form of these tokens on day one, versus having to form a company, having to go out there and raise a bunch of money, having to then go hire a bunch of developers and go use a bunch of compute to kind of go deliver an AI solution. So the market and this incentive solves the chicken or egg problem that exists for talented individuals to leave their day job at Meta to go do something in the AI space.
Yeah, and
I think that
already,
makes, go ahead.
oh, sorry, yeah, and I know this report does highlights actually how some of these projects have actually already accreted value, and so it's visible for the value created within some of these subnets.
Yeah, it's very, very early. Like subnets, the idea Bittensor, and allowed or enabled kind of subnets to be created, but maybe 12 months ago or so, and then the subnet tokens were launched in February. So we're in kind of the early phase, the first generation of subnets. Is there an Amazon in there? Is there an Uber in there? I don't know. But I think the beauty of these decentralized systems is it's a permissionless network on which anybody can launch an idea.
So you mentioned it's early. Maybe we just talk about conceptually what this might look like in your mind 10, 20, 50 years from now.
Well, okay, take out my crystal ball. So I remember seeing kind of the Uber, I don't know if it was like the seed round or the Series A round back in the day, and Airbnb. I was like, oh my God, these are terrible ideas. Like, who is going to allow a random stranger to get in their back seat or stay in their bedroom? So I don't think I will be good at predicting kind of ultimately kind of what are going to be the subnets or the applications that get built in Bittensor that are kind of world changing. But I do think that if you think about, especially in the world of kind of crypto, the ambition of this project, the idea of creating kind of a worldwide web of intelligence, and transforming the way that AI applications get started, funded, and creating this opportunity for anybody to be able to invest in AI is a super exciting big idea. And so, in the same way that when, the Mosaic browser got launched in 1995, you could have never have imagined, an Uber or a TikTok. It's hard to even fathom kind of what this is going to enable. But I think when you think about things like robotics as an example, and the AI applications for robotics, Bittensor could power, kind of the future robots on Earth, or it could be the system on which drug discovery, we start curing, types of cancers. It's really kind of unlimited because you're harnessing the power of the crowd.
Yeah. And actually, I kind of want to add to that, Barry, because one of the, in the conversation I had again a couple days ago was that a lot of these researchers are starting to think that the breakthrough for AI is going to come from AI interacting with the real world. So it starts with people using AI for voice, and it's already very popular that, and strangely, that many people use AI actually as like a therapist, like as a companion. But to improve the training of AI, they need the devices to actually be interacting with the real world, because there's only so much that like images and Google and text messages and emails can actually train and help AI understand how we interact. And so do you think that a decentralized AI model, and especially because you're, as you say, you're creating incentives for people to innovate, could actually do faster learning or have breakthroughs compared to a centralized approach to AI that is built around these foundational models?
Well, absolutely, 100%. But I think you have to break it down into, you have the data set, you have the compute, you have the training, you have the inference, and with Bittensor, you have subnets for each one of those, and there's competition for each one of those. So you have this market-based system where you let's look at the data set, piece, for example. Because there are these incentives that are being given out for people to access, mine, or make available data, you all of a sudden have the ability, I believe, to unlock sources of data that currently is not being monetized. And there will, I think, be a growing number of owners of data who are going to say, okay, I can enter into an exclusive deal with OpenAI and sell my data to them, or make my data available to them for model kind of training or otherwise, or I can make it available to the masses and receive economics or incentives from the masses who are then kind of using that data for lots of different purposes. And I just think the latter is a better approach to unlocking data.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, it's because over time, I agree with you. Like, I can't predict the path and evolution of AI, but I can see that today these foundational models, I'm not sure why they should be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. When eventually all the code base that these are moving to the same place, and therefore the innovation is going to be people specializing in specific ideas and applications. And I know, like you said, it's early with Bittensor because this, let's say, Sport Tensor is early, but it's already doing better at predicting league outcomes than the NBA models. And so and again, there is going to be an incentive for someone to create a subnet that actually can interact with a physical device in a very elegant way, right? I mean, so is that where you sort of see the ability of like these subnets to make sort of these incremental marginal improvements?
Yeah, I love the idea of permissionless innovation and the experimentation that has and will happen, and it's all happening on Bittensor right now. And there are decentralized AI crypto projects that have raised a ton of money. Most of them haven't even launched yet, or they're focused on kind of one specific kind of use case, compute or otherwise. Bittensor is this open global platform where who knows what the innovation, what the subnets will be that are going to be built on Bittensor. But I'm really excited to see that happen. I mean, like right now, let's kind of equate it kind of the early days of the internet. In 1995, it probably was $500,000 million to launch a website, and today it's like $5 through Squarespace. And so today there's a cost to launching a subnet, but in the future, if it costs $5 to launch a subnet, and there's thousands of these kind of applications kind of out there, how cool would that be?
Yeah,
that'd be very cool. Yeah, and to Tom's point regarding commoditization of models, yeah, Bittensor is at a very interesting area in the AI stack because, yeah, there's monetary incentives to develop models, but you have apps layered on top of that. And so, there's a path towards when that monetization shifts to the app layer, as I think Tom's alluding to, the Tau token should benefit from that, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we're starting to see with the Tau, like all roads lead back to the Tau token. If you kind of think about kind of how money flows work, because if you buy a subnet token, it's essentially kind of locking up Tau within kind of that subnet liquidity pool. But what's happening right now is a number of the subnets are now starting to kind of turn on their monetization, where they're now generating revenue through the output of the subnet, through the intelligence they're generating, and they're then using that revenue to essentially kind of buy back some or all of the alpha tokens that are being generated. So it's more than just, this isn't like, hey, I'm going to bet on this subnet because I think they're really smart people. No, it's actually, like, from an investment perspective, they're going to generate they're going to commoditize some kind of intelligence. They're going to sell that intelligence. They're going to use that revenue to then buy back the token, and that creates more incentive for them to continue to innovate, but also for the miners, the competitors. There's more money up for grabs in that subnet based on the higher the value of that alpha token or the subnet token.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It does make sense. Yeah, so I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball. If you find one, would love to know. So, this is a semi apology for that 50-year time horizon question. But is there anything over the next 18, say 24 months, specific to Bittensor, maybe big upgrades or partnerships coming down the line that we should be aware of?
With Bittensor, as opposed to most other crypto projects, you have now essentially kind of 128 teams that are now trying to enter into partnerships. They're trying to launch products. I think for Bittensor over the next 18 months, it's really just a matter of it's certainly education. This is a really hard concept to kind of get your arms around. So it's education and it's awareness. I think it's access for investors. It's still really, really hard to invest in Tau. And so, again, like Grayscale Tau Trust helps solve that. Yuma, we will soon be launching a way for institutional investors to invest in the subnet tokens. So we're going to kind of make it easier for access.
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
then we will, I think, start to see some subnets kind of break out from a usefulness perspective, from a value creation perspective, and I think that'll bring a lot of attention to Bittensor when that happens.
Can you tell me more about those Yuma plans? Is that going to be like a index of subnet tokens, or will it be individual subnet token products? Do you have that sussed out yet? Maybe not.
Yeah, more to come. We will share more when we can.
Understood. Good stuff. Yeah. So look, we're coming up on time here. I have a few, we'll call them lightning round questions.
Actually, there's something else I want to bring up with Barry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is Barry comes from the traditional financial world, Houlihan Lokey, so he understands, the sources and how innovation creates, crises. But we know crisis in Japanese is kiki, which is danger and opportunity. But for instance, when there's been financial innovation, let's say consumer credit in the early 90s, almost every nation that introduced credit cards had a debt crisis, whether it was Korea or Latin America. And then in the 2000s, when mortgages and house prices, and we started to securitize mortgages in a really industrial scale, that created a debt crisis in America. So we know that financial innovation creates some opportunities, but then of course leads to a crisis. And one of the things that I think I'm seeing when I hear from researchers and innovation in AI is that AI safety is less than 1% of all jobs. So this was, Suleiman wrote about it in the book, The Coming Wave. And that's because AI has yet to have had an accident. In the financial services industry, where there have been accidents from innovation, 50% of all jobs at a bank are safety related, compliance or consumer safety. Now, I know the word safety sounds like censorship in crypto, but to me, I think an incentive system makes a lot of sense. So I actually kind of want to throw this at Barry. Like, Barry, would a decentralized AI arguably be a way to innovate and create AI safety, not in the sense of censorship, but to really prevent a financial accident, or after we have an accident in AI, that a decentralized AI model actually is the one that may be the safest to be working with?
Super interesting question. If I think about kind of the various financial crises that I've now experienced, they tend to be a result of, I mean, leverage is kind of a common theme, but also it's a lack of transparency. And I feel like, especially with Bittensor, all this is open. All it's and so while there may be there will certainly be subnets applications that get launched which people won't like. But the market, because it's a market-based system, the market, I believe, will downvote anything that is being used in a way that people deem to be kind of dangerous or nefarious. So I think a combination of transparency in a market-based system could be the antidotes to that risk that you're identifying.
Well, here's a scenario. Say OpenAI achieves AGI, and that AGI needs to get shut down for safety reasons. That probably just ends up getting spun up on Bittensor, right? If there's market demand, as I'm sure there will be. And maybe that AGI ends up living on a subnet.
Yep.
Maybe. Great.
Or maybe Bittensor will help us keep air-gapped weapons to fight AI robots, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
you never know if it gets that dangerous.
Yeah. Well, like if the Matrix plays out and the computer is ruling humans, it's likely built on Bittensor, but we'll be all long gone by then.
That's right. Great. Well, again, we're coming up on time here, but would love to maybe give both of you some time for some parting thoughts, whether it be on AI or crypto or, Tom, just the broader macro environment here. We can start with Tom and then let our guest take us home.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty constructive on Bitcoin and crypto, because for the first time, really in all the years I've been researching crypto, the regulatory environment is actually really open to the idea of allowing the innovation that comes from Bitcoin and crypto and the decentralization and the trust on the blockchain, to allow us to innovate the financial system. So I'm really not only bullish on Bitcoin, but I really like the idea of some of these projects like Bittensor, which is really trying to create innovation incentives, make a lot of sense. And again, these are the earliest days. So as Barry says, like we got to see how this plays out, but it's creating the right incentive system. So I'm really constructive on what's happening in crypto.
Yeah,
That's great.
I'm pretty excited about kind of where the industry is, where the asset class is, and the kind of the potential going forward. I think there's definitely elements that kind of give me pause and make me a bit uncomfortable. And I think kind of given the likelihood of additional kind of monetary kind of easing and ultimately kind of getting back to kind of money printing, any asset that is kind of durable and kind of scarce is going to perform well. And so obviously Bitcoin and a subset of these tokens will kind of perform pretty well. And so I'm like cautiously bullish. But I think for us and for for Bittensor, like I said, this is I feel like every 10 years I kind of have a bit of an epiphany and a big idea. And 10 years ago for me it was Bitcoin. today it's Bittensor, and we really just want to be a force for good as people are starting to learn about Bittensor. Reach out to us. We want to help with education. If investors want to get involved, we want to help them kind of navigate how best to kind of deploy capital. So please reach out.
Yeah, where should people reach out if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Probably the Yuma website is probably the best place. There's a form there. It's yumaai.com. yumaai.com. But I'm pretty easy to get to.
Great. And for any Tau specific information, like I said, we will be resending that report out with a follow-up email from this webinar. But with that, I think it's time to conclude this discussion that I thought was pretty riveting. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Barry, for joining. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Right.
Thank you.